The morning mist rolled off the Afghan mountains like ghostly fingers, concealing secrets that could change everything. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez had tracked insurgents across 3 countries, through deserts that could kill a man in hours and jungles where every shadow held death. He had earned his sealed trident through blood, sweat, and an unwavering commitment to his brothers in arms, but nothing in his 15 years of service had prepared him for what emerged from that mountain fog on a Tuesday that started like any other. What happens when the hunter becomes the hunted? When the enemy you've been tracking for months suddenly has backup you never saw coming. And when that backup turns out to be someone who shouldn't exist according to every intelligence report you've ever read? In the remote mountains of Afghanistan, where ancient tribal laws clash with modern warfare, where loyalty is measured in bullets and betrayal can mean death, a team of elite Navy SEALs is about to discover that their most dangerous enemy isn't the one they've been hunting. Sometimes the most lethal threat comes from the person you never see coming, the ghost in the mist who changes everything with a single shot. This is the story of Operation Silent Thunder, a mission that was supposed to be routine reconnaissance but became a fight for survival that would test every skill these warriors had ever learned. It's about trust earned in the crucible of combat, about enemies who become allies, and about the thin line between duty and conscience in a war where nothing is ever black and white. The woman with the rifle was just the beginning. The helicopter's rotors cut through the thin mountain air as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez checked his gear one final time. The Chinook carried 12 of the Navy's finest, but Rodriguez knew that in these mountains, numbers meant less than experience, and experience meant everything. He had been hunting the same target for 8 months now, a ghost named Khalil Hassan, who seemed to vanish whenever American forces got close. The mission briefing had been simple enough. Intelligence suggested Hassan was moving through the coast province, using ancient smuggling routes that had served traders and warriors for centuries. The SEALs would insert at dawn, track the target, and gather intelligence on his network. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. Rodriguez had heard those words before, and he knew how quickly situations could change in these mountains. Petty Officer First Class Jake Morrison sat across from Rodriguez, cleaning his M4 carbine with the methodical precision that had kept him alive through 3 tours. Morrison was the team's communications specialist, but like all SEALs, he could fight as well as any infantry soldier. His radio crackled softly with updates from command, painting a picture of enemy movement that seemed almost too convenient. "Something feels off about this one," Morrison said quietly, his voice barely audible over the helicopter's engines. "Intel's too clean, too specific. Hassan's been a ghost for months and suddenly we know exactly where he'll be?" Rodriguez nodded. He had learned to trust Morrison's instincts. The younger SEAL had a gift for reading between the lines of intelligence reports, for sensing when something didn't add up. In Afghanistan, that kind of intuition had saved more lives than all the high-tech equipment in their arsenal. Chief Petty Officer David Chen, the team's medic and second-in-command, moved through the helicopter checking on each man. Chen had been in special operations for 12 years, and his calm presence steadied the entire team. He paused next to Rodriguez, speaking in the low tone that never revealed whether they were discussing the weather or a life-or-death situation. "Weather reports show fog moving in from the northwest," Chen said. "Could work for us or against us. Visibility will be limited, but so will theirs." The fog was already visible from the helicopter, rolling across the mountain peaks like a slow-moving tide. Rodriguez studied the terrain through his night vision goggles, memorizing landmarks and escape routes. These mountains had been the graveyard of empires, from Alexander's Macedonians to the Soviet army. They demanded respect from anyone who dared to cross them. Petty Officer, Second Class Alex Thompson, their explosives expert, was unusually quiet. Thompson normally kept the team's spirits up with his endless supply of stories and jokes, but today he seemed focused on something beyond their immediate mission. He had grown up in Montana, and these mountains reminded him of home in ways that both comforted and unsettled him. 10 minutes to insertion," the pilot announced over the intercom. Rodriguez gathered his team with a gesture, and they huddled together for final coordination. "Remember, we're ghosts today," Rodriguez told them. "Hassan has survived this long because he's smart and careful. We track, we observe, we report. The moment we reveal ourselves, we lose our advantage." The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone, a narrow valley between 2 ridges that would provide cover from observation. Rodriguez could see the pilot struggling slightly with the controls as mountain winds buffeted the aircraft. Landing in these conditions required skill and no small amount of luck. As they approached the ground, Rodriguez noticed something that hadn't appeared in the intelligence briefings. There were recent vehicle tracks in the valley, tire patterns that suggested heavy trucks had passed through within the last day or two. He made a mental note to report this information. But something about the tracks troubled him. They were too regular, too organized for typical insurgent movement. The Chinook touched down with a heavy thud, and Rodriguez led his team out into the grey morning light. The air was thin and cold, carrying the scent of snow and pine from the higher elevations. Within seconds, the helicopter was airborne again, leaving the SEALs alone in hostile territory, with nothing but their training, their weapons, and their trust in each other. Rodriguez immediately established a perimeter while Chen checked their position with GPS. The landing zone was secure, but they needed to move quickly. In these mountains, every minute on the ground increased their risk of detection. Local shepherds, Taliban spotters, or simple villagers could all pose threats to operational security. Morrison set up his communication equipment and established contact with their forward operating base. The radio check was brief and professional, confirming their safe insertion and expected timeline for the mission. But even as he spoke, Morrison continued to scan their surroundings with the practiced eye of someone who had learned that threats could emerge from anywhere. The team moved out in standard formation, with Thompson taking point and Rodriguez bringing up the rear. They followed a goat trail that wound between large boulders, providing natural cover from observation. The terrain was challenging but manageable, and their physical conditioning allowed them to maintain a steady pace despite the altitude. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the morning mist began to thicken. What had seemed like a minor weather condition from the helicopter was becoming a significant factor in their mission. Visibility dropped to less than 50 meters, turning their high-tech equipment into expensive weight and forcing them to rely on fundamental infantry skills. Chen called for a brief halt when they reached a rocky outcropping that provided good observation of the valley below. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see the smuggling route that Hassan was reportedly using. It looked innocuous enough, just another mountain trail worn smooth by generations of travelers. But intelligence suggested this path was part of a network that moved weapons, money, and fighters throughout the region. Thompson noticed something first. A reflection in the distance, just a brief flash of light that might have been sunlight on metal or glass. In these mountains, such things rarely happen by accident. He alerted Rodriguez with a subtle hand signal, and the team immediately took defensive positions among the rocks. For several minutes they watched and waited. The fog continued to thicken, making observation increasingly difficult. Rodriguez weighed their options. They could continue with the mission despite reduced visibility, or they could find a hiding place and wait for conditions to improve. Both choices carried risks. The decision was made for them when Morrison picked up radio chatter on insurgent frequencies. The conversation was in Pashto, but Morrison's language training was sufficient to understand the basics. Someone was coordinating movement along the trail they were supposed to be watching. Hassan's group was ahead of schedule. Rodriguez made quick calculations. If they moved immediately, they could reach an observation position before Hassan's group arrived. The fog that limited their visibility would also conceal their movement from enemy observers. It was risky, but all military operations involved calculated risks. The team moved swiftly but carefully through the increasingly thick fog. Chen led now, using his mountaineering experience to find the safest route across the treacherous terrain. Behind him, Morrison monitored radio frequencies while Thompson watched for any signs of enemy activity. They reached their planned observation post just as the fog became so thick that visibility dropped to less than 20 meters. Rodriguez positioned his men in a defensive semicircle around a cluster of large rocks that provided both concealment and fields of fire in multiple directions. Now they would wait for Hassan and his group to pass below them on the ancient smuggling trail. But waiting in these mountains was never simple. Every sound could be a threat. Every shadow might conceal an enemy fighter. The cold ate through their gear despite the advanced materials and heating elements. Worse, the fog continued to thicken, creating an environment where friend and foe could be indistinguishable until it was too late. Rodriguez had been in similar situations before, but something about this mission felt different. Maybe it was Morrison's earlier observation about the intelligence being too clean. Maybe it was the vehicle tracks they had seen in the landing zone. Or maybe it was simply the accumulated wisdom of years in combat zones, where survival often depended on trusting instincts over briefings. As they settled into their positions, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. In Afghanistan, that feeling usually meant the difference between completing a successful mission and fighting for their lives. The fog swirled around them like a living thing, concealing secrets that could change everything. Soon, they would discover just how accurate that feeling had been. The first sound they heard wasn't what Rodriguez expected. Instead of footsteps on the trail below, it was the distinctive whistle that local shepherds used to call their flocks. The sound echoed off the mountain walls, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. Rodriguez tensed, knowing that such signals were often used by Taliban fighters to coordinate their movements without revealing their positions. Chen moved closer to Rodriguez's position, his medical training having taught him to read subtle signs of stress and danger. He had noticed the same thing Rodriguez had sensed, that indefinable feeling that their mission was about to become significantly more complicated. The fog had created a world where sound became more important than sight, where every noise needed immediate analysis. Morrison adjusted his radio equipment, trying to lock on to the insurgent communications he had detected earlier. The mountain terrain played havoc with radio signals, bouncing them unpredictably and creating false echoes that could mislead even experienced operators. But gradually, he began to piece together fragments of conversation that painted a troubling picture. "They're not just moving through," Morrison whispered to Rodriguez. "They're setting up something. I'm hearing references to positions and timing. This might be more than just a smuggling run." Thompson had positioned himself at the edge of their perimeter, where he could observe the trail through the limited visibility. His explosives training had taught him to think in terms of ambushes and defensive positions, and the terrain around them would be perfect for such purposes. Too perfect, perhaps, for a simple intelligence-gathering mission. The fog continued to thicken, creating an almost supernatural atmosphere where familiar objects became alien shapes and every shadow might conceal a threat. Rodriguez had operated in many environments during his career, from jungle swamps to urban battlefields, but mountain fog presented unique challenges. It was like fighting blind, where experience and instinct mattered more than technology. A new sound emerged from the mist, the soft jingle of metal that could be equipment or weapons. Rodriguez held up his hand, and his team froze in their positions. Through his earpiece, he could hear the controlled breathing of his men, each one fighting the natural human instinct to move when threatened. In special operations, discipline often meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The sound grew closer, and Rodriguez realized they were hearing a pack animal, probably a mule loaded with supplies. In these mountains, such animals were common forms of transportation, capable of navigating terrain that would defeat most vehicles. But they also meant that Hassan's group was larger and better supplied than intelligence reports had suggested. Chen caught Rodriguez's attention with a subtle gesture, pointing toward a section of trail that was barely visible through the fog. Moving carefully along the path was indeed a mule, but it was being led by someone whose movement patterns immediately identified him as a trained fighter. The way he checked his surroundings, the manner in which he held his weapon, everything about him screamed professional soldier. Behind the first man came others, spaced at proper intervals and moving with the kind of coordination that indicated extensive training. These weren't the typical insurgent fighters that coalition forces usually encountered. Rodriguez counted at least 6 men before the fog obscured his view, and he suspected there were more he couldn't see. Morrison was picking up more radio traffic now, and his expression grew increasingly concerned as he translated the conversations. The group below wasn't just passing through. They were establishing positions for what sounded like a significant operation. References to timing and coordination suggested something much larger than a simple smuggling run. Thompson had spotted something else that troubled him. Among the equipment being carried by the mules, he could see shapes that looked suspiciously like sophisticated weapons systems. Through his scope, he glimpsed what appeared to be components for advanced anti-aircraft missiles, the kind that could threaten coalition helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. The implications hit Rodriguez immediately. If Hassan's group was setting up anti-aircraft positions in these mountains, they could effectively control air traffic throughout the region. Medical evacuation helicopters, supply flights, close air support missions, all would become significantly more dangerous. This wasn't just an intelligence-gathering opportunity, it was a potential game-changer for coalition operations. But their orders had been clear. Observe and report no engagement unless absolutely necessary. Rodriguez weighed his options carefully. They could continue to monitor the situation and report what they observed, or they could take action to prevent what appeared to be a significant escalation in enemy capabilities. The decision was complicated by their tactical situation. They were outnumbered by an unknown factor, operating in terrain that favored defenders with limited visibility and no immediate prospect of reinforcement. Even for Navy SEALs, those were challenging odds that demanded careful consideration. As Rodriguez pondered their next move, the fog began to shift slightly, opening brief windows of clearer visibility. Through one such gap, he saw something that changed everything. Among Hassan's group was a figure that didn't fit the pattern of the others. Smaller, moving differently, positioned in a way that suggested importance beyond mere participation in the operation. Chen had seen it too, and his medical training allowed him to make observations that escaped others. The figure's gait, posture, and general body language suggested someone younger and possibly female, though the heavy winter clothing made positive identification impossible at their current distance. Morrison continued monitoring radio communications, and gradually a clearer picture emerged of what Hassan's group was planning. They weren't just establishing anti-aircraft positions, they were coordinating with other cells throughout the region for what sounded like a coordinated offensive operation. The scope of what they were uncovering went far beyond their original mission parameters. Thompson noticed movement on a different section of trail, indicating that Hassan's group was larger than they had initially estimated. Through the swirling fog, he could see additional figures establishing positions on ridges that would give them commanding views of the valley approaches. These weren't just passing through, they were turning this area into a fortress. The tactical situation was becoming increasingly complex. Rodriguez realized they had stumbled onto something far more significant than a simple smuggling operation. The intelligence that had brought them here might have been accurate, but it had failed to capture the true scope of Hassan's activities in the region. A new sound caught their attention, the distinctive whine of vehicles struggling up mountain roads. Through the fog came the rumble of heavy engines, suggesting that Hassan's operation involved significant logistical support. Rodriguez felt the familiar tension that preceded combat, the heightened awareness that came when a mission shifted from observation to potential action. Morrison's radio crackled with urgent communications from multiple sources. Hassan's people weren't just setting up one position, they were establishing a network of mutually supporting positions throughout the mountain range. The scale of the operation suggested planning and resources that went far beyond typical insurgent capabilities. Chen moved to a new observation position that offered a better view of the trail system below. Through the fog, he could see that Hassan's group had divided into smaller teams, each moving toward predetermined positions. The coordination was impressive, indicating training and experience that matched or exceeded what they might expect from conventional military forces. Thompson identified what appeared to be command and control equipment among the supplies being moved by the pack animals. Sophisticated communications gear, possibly including satellite uplinks, suggested that this operation was connected to a larger network that might span multiple countries in the region. Rodriguez made his decision. The situation had evolved beyond their original mission parameters, and the potential threat to coalition operations was too significant to ignore. They would continue to gather intelligence, but they would also prepare for the possibility that they might need to take action to prevent Hassan's group from establishing their positions. The fog continued to swirl around them, concealing friends and enemies equally. In this environment, where visibility was measured in meters rather than kilometers, where every sound might indicate a threat, Rodriguez and his team prepared for what was becoming a very different kind of mission than they had expected when they left their forward operating base that morning. As they settled into their new tactical positions, Rodriguez couldn't help but think about the figure that didn't fit the pattern of Hassan's group. In a region where assumptions could be deadly, where allies and enemies often wore the same clothes and spoke the same language, that anomaly represented both a potential opportunity and a significant danger. Soon, they would discover just how accurate that assessment had been. The shot came from nowhere, a single crack that echoed through the mountains like thunder. Rodriguez immediately dropped into a defensive position, his weapon ready as he scanned for the source of the gunfire. But instead of the chaos of an enemy attack, an eerie silence followed, broken only by the sound of his team's controlled breathing through their communications equipment. Chen was the first to spot the source of the disturbance. Through the fog, a figure approached their position with deliberate slowness, hands clearly visible and weapon pointed toward the ground. The person moved with obvious caution, but without the furtive behavior of someone attempting a covert approach. Whatever was happening, it wasn't a typical enemy contact. Morrison had his rifle trained on the approaching figure while simultaneously monitoring radio frequencies for any indication that this was part of a coordinated attack. The insurgent communications he had been tracking continued unchanged, suggesting that Hassan's group was unaware of what was happening on the ridge above their positions. Thompson shifted to cover a different approach route, ensuring that their perimeter remained secure while Chen and Rodriguez dealt with whatever was developing. His explosives training had taught him to think several moves ahead, considering not just immediate threats, but potential developments that might require rapid response. As the figure came closer, details became visible through the swirling fog. It was indeed a woman, younger than Rodriguez had initially estimated, wearing a mixture of traditional Afghan clothing and modern tactical gear. Her rifle, a well-maintained AK-47, was carried with the familiarity that indicated extensive training and experience. Rodriguez made a quick decision based on years of experience in similar situations. The woman's approach suggested she wanted to communicate rather than fight. But in Afghanistan, such encounters could be deceptive. He kept his weapon ready while signaling for his team to maintain their defensive positions around their perimeter. When the woman was about 20 meters away, she stopped and called out in accented but clearly understandable English. Her voice was steady despite the obvious danger of her situation, approaching armed soldiers in hostile territory where misunderstandings were often fatal. American soldiers, I need to speak with your leader. My name is Zara Khalil, and I have information about the men you are watching. The surname struck Rodriguez immediately. Khalil was the family name of their target, Hassan Khalil. This could be a relative, possibly someone with inside knowledge of Hassan's operations. But it could also be a trap. A sophisticated attempt to lure them into a vulnerable position or gather intelligence about American capabilities. Chen moved to a position where he could provide covering fire while Rodriguez made contact. His medical training included psychology courses that helped him read people in stressful situations, and something about the woman's demeanor suggested genuine urgency rather than deception. Morrison continued monitoring communications while keeping one ear on the developing conversation. The radio chatter from Hassan's group remained focused on their setup activities, with no indication that they were aware of the contact taking place above them. But he also noticed an increase in radio traffic from other areas, suggesting that something larger was developing in the region. Rodriguez called out to the woman, maintaining the formal distance that tactical situations required. In Afghanistan, such encounters demanded careful protocol to prevent misunderstandings that could escalate into violence. Stop where you are and state your business clearly. How do you know we are here? And why should we trust anything you tell us? The woman, Zara, remained motionless as she replied. Her positioning suggested military or paramilitary training, someone who understood how to approach armed soldiers without triggering their defensive responses. She kept her hands visible and her weapon in a non-threatening position, while maintaining enough distance to avoid appearing as an immediate threat. I've been following Hassan's group for 3 days. I saw your helicopter insertion this morning and tracked your movement to this position. Hassan is my uncle, but he is planning something that will bring destruction to my village and many others in this valley. Thompson noted that her English was excellent, with an accent that suggested education and possibly time spent outside Afghanistan. In his experience, such linguistic skills often indicated connections to intelligence services or international organizations, possibilities that could significantly complicate their tactical situation. Rodriguez weighed his options quickly. Standard operating procedures called for maintaining distance from unknown contacts, but the woman's information could be crucial for understanding Hassan's operation and protecting coalition forces. The mention of her village also suggested local knowledge that might be valuable for future operations in the region. Chen observed the woman's physical condition and equipment through his scope. She appeared well-fed and properly equipped, suggesting backing from some organization with resources. Her tactical gear was newer than what typical insurgent fighters carried, but not so advanced as to suggest direct military support. Morrison picked up a new element in the radio communications he was monitoring. References to timing suggested that Hassan's operation was approaching a critical phase, possibly within hours rather than days. This added urgency to their tactical situation and made the woman's offer of information more significant. Rodriguez made his decision based on the combination of tactical necessity and operational opportunity. They needed better intelligence about Hassan's operation, and the woman appeared to offer exactly that. But he would maintain security protocols while gathering whatever information she could provide. Approach slowly with your weapon slung across your back. Any sudden movements will be interpreted as hostile action. We will listen to what you have to say, but understand that we cannot guarantee your safety if this is some kind of deception. Zara complied with the instructions, moving with the careful precision of someone who understood that her life depended on not alarming the soldiers she was approaching. As she came closer, more details of her appearance and equipment became visible through the fog. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with the weathered complexion of someone who spent significant time outdoors in harsh conditions. Her clothing was practical rather than fashionable, designed for mountain warfare rather than civilian life. Most importantly, her eyes held the steady gaze of someone accustomed to danger and capable of making difficult decisions under pressure. Thompson maintained overwatch, while his teammates handled the contact, scanning their perimeter for any signs that this was part of a larger trap. His position allowed him to observe both the approaching woman and the trail below where Hassan's group continued their activities, apparently unaware of what was happening above them. Chen moved to a position where he could provide immediate medical assistance if the contact went wrong. while also maintaining a clear field of fire. His assessment of the woman suggested someone in good physical condition with military or paramilitary training, but he also noticed signs of stress and fatigue that indicated she had been operating under difficult conditions for an extended period. Morrison continued monitoring radio communications while keeping track of the developing situation. The insurgent radio traffic remained focused on operational details, but he also noticed new communications from different areas that suggested coordinated activity across a wider region than they had initially understood. When Zara reached the designated distance, Rodriguez began his questioning. In these situations, information gathering required balancing the need for intelligence with operational security. Too many questions might reveal American capabilities, while too few might miss critical intelligence that could save lives. Tell us about Hassan's operation. What is he planning? And why do you think we need to know about it? Zara's response revealed the scope of what they had stumbled upon. Hassan wasn't just establishing anti-aircraft positions, he was preparing for a coordinated attack that would target coalition supply lines, medical facilities, and civilian infrastructure throughout the region. The operation was scheduled to begin at sunset, when most coalition forces would be returning to their bases for the night. The revelation changed everything about their tactical situation. They were no longer conducting reconnaissance of a smuggling operation. They were in position to prevent a major offensive that could affect thousands of people. But they were also outnumbered and operating without immediate support in terrain that favored defenders. Thompson noticed increased activity on the trail below, suggesting that Hassan's group was moving toward the final phase of their preparations. Through his scope, he could see equipment being positioned and personnel moving to predetermined locations. Time was becoming a critical factor in whatever decision Rodriguez made about their next actions. Morrison's radio monitoring revealed that the coordinated nature of Hassan's operation extended beyond what they could see from their current position. Communications indicated multiple groups operating throughout the mountain range, all apparently working toward the same operational timeline. Rodriguez realized they were facing a decision that would define not just their mission, but potentially the security situation for the entire region. The information Zara had provided suggested an imminent threat that demanded immediate action, but taking such action would commit them to a combat operation for which they were not prepared or supported. The command post was exactly where Zara had said it would be, hidden in a natural cave formation that provided protection from both observation and weather, while offering commanding views of the entire operational area. Rodriguez could see why Hassan had chosen this location. It was virtually invisible from air reconnaissance, but provided excellent communications coverage for coordinating multiple ground elements. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez counted at least 8 fighters around the command post, all armed with automatic weapons and positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. Hassan himself was visible, a tall man in his 40s directing activities with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. The setup was professional and well-planned, confirming that they were dealing with experienced operators rather than typical insurgent fighters. Chen had positioned himself to provide overwatch and medical support, while maintaining communications with Morrison and Thompson, who were establishing positions that would allow them to support the assault while monitoring Hassan's other operations throughout the region. The coordination required precise timing and clear communications to prevent friendly fire incidents in the limited visibility conditions. Morrison's radio monitoring revealed that Hassan was indeed coordinating with multiple cells throughout the mountain range, and the timeline for the evening's attacks remained unchanged. Radio traffic indicated that anti-aircraft positions were nearly complete and that fighters were moving into position for what appeared to be coordinated strikes against coalition targets across 3 provinces. Thompson had identified specific tactical challenges that would need to be addressed during the assault. The cave entrance was naturally defensible, with limited approaches that could be easily covered by defending fighters. However, the same terrain features that made it defensible also limited escape routes, potentially trapping Hassan's forces once the attack began. Zara provided detailed intelligence about the internal layout of the cave system and the defensive positions that Hassan's fighters would likely use. Her knowledge was obviously based on direct observation, confirming that she had indeed been monitoring her uncle's operations for an extended period. More importantly, she identified potential weaknesses in the defensive setup that could be exploited by attacking forces. Rodriguez finalized his assault plan based on the intelligence available and the capabilities of his team. They would approach the command post from 2 directions, using the natural terrain features to provide concealment while maintaining communications with their supporting elements. The key would be achieving surprise while preventing Hassan from escaping or alerting his other forces to the threat they faced. The fog had continued to thin throughout the afternoon, improving visibility but also increasing their risk of detection during the approach to Hassan's position. Rodriguez timed their final movement to coincide with natural light conditions that would provide the best balance between concealment and operational effectiveness. As they began their approach, Morrison intercepted communications indicating that Hassan was preparing to transmit final coordination instructions to his cells throughout the region. The timing suggested that the evening's attacks would begin within 2 hours, making their assault not just tactically important, but strategically critical for preventing a major escalation in regional violence. Chen monitored the team's readiness while maintaining communications with higher command, providing updates on their situation and requesting standby support in case the operation expanded beyond their immediate capabilities. The response confirmed that additional resources were being positioned to support their mission, but timing would be critical for preventing Hassan's attacks from proceeding as planned. Thompson moved into his final overwatch position, where he could provide supporting fire during the assault, while maintaining observation of the approaches that Hassan's reinforcements might use. His explosives training allowed him to identify potential targets that could disrupt enemy operations, even if the primary assault encountered unexpected difficulties. Zara guided Rodriguez and Chen through the final approach to the cave entrance, using her knowledge of local terrain to avoid the observation positions that Hassan's security teams had established. Her movements were confident and precise, confirming that she had indeed spent considerable time studying Hassan's operational methods and defensive preparations. The assault began at Rodriguez's signal, with coordinated movement from multiple directions designed to overwhelm Hassan's defenders before they could organize effective resistance. The SEALs' training and experience showed immediately as they moved through the terrain with deadly efficiency, using their superior equipment and tactics to neutralize resistance while advancing toward their primary objective. Hassan's fighters responded with the discipline and training that Rodriguez had expected, taking cover and returning fire while attempting to coordinate their defense through shouted commands and hand signals. But they were facing elite special operations forces with superior training, equipment, and tactical coordination, and the outcome of the direct engagement was never seriously in doubt. The critical moment came when Hassan himself appeared at the cave entrance, apparently attempting to reach communications equipment that would allow him to alert his other forces to the attack. Rodriguez and Zara moved to intercept him, using covering fire from Chen and Thompson to suppress the remaining defenders while preventing Hassan from escaping or communicating with his network. Hassan's capture provided immediate intelligence that confirmed the scope of his planned operations and revealed additional targets that coalition forces needed to address. Under interrogation, he revealed the locations of weapons caches, the identities of key operatives, and the timeline for attacks that extended beyond the immediate evening operations to include longer-term strategic objectives. Morrison's communications intercepts revealed that Hassan's failure to transmit his final coordination instructions had created confusion among his cells throughout the region. Some were proceeding with their planned attacks, while others were waiting for confirmation that never came. The disruption was providing coalition forces with opportunities to respond to individual threats before they could achieve their intended coordination. Thompson moved to secure the cave and its contents, discovering sophisticated communications equipment, detailed maps showing coalition positions and vulnerabilities, and weapons that included advanced anti-aircraft missiles capable of threatening military and civilian aircraft throughout the region. The intelligence value of the materials captured exceeded anything they had expected from the original mission. Chen provided medical treatment for wounded fighters while maintaining security around the command post. His professional approach to treating both friendly and enemy casualties reflected the standards that separated professional military forces from insurgent organizations, even in the heat of combat operations. Zara's role in the successful assault confirmed her value as an intelligence source and potential long-term asset for coalition operations in the region. Her knowledge of local conditions, insurgent networks, and operational methods provided capabilities that would be difficult to develop through conventional intelligence gathering methods. Rodriguez coordinated with higher command to ensure that follow-up operations could exploit the intelligence and opportunities created by their intervention. Hassan's captured communications revealed a network that extended far beyond what intelligence services had previously understood, requiring coordinated action across multiple provinces and potentially multiple countries. The fog that had concealed their morning insertion was beginning to lift as evening approached, revealing the full scope of the mountain range where Hassan's operations had been centered. From their position at the captured command post, Rodriguez could see evidence of the extensive network that Hassan had built over months of careful preparation. Morrison's final communications intercepts revealed that the disruption of Hassan's coordinated attacks had indeed prevented what could have been a significant escalation in regional violence. Individual cells were either surrendering or being neutralized by coalition forces who had been alerted to their positions and plans through the intelligence gathered during the assault. Thompson's examination of the captured equipment revealed that Hassan's organization had access to resources and technology that suggested support from sophisticated sources, possibly including state-level sponsors. This intelligence would require careful analysis by specialists to understand the full implications for regional security and coalition operations. Chen's medical assessment of the team confirmed that they had completed their expanded mission without significant casualties, despite operating under conditions and against opposition that far exceeded their original mission parameters. The success reflected their training, experience, and ability to adapt to rapidly changing tactical situations. As helicopters approached to extract the team and their prisoners, Rodriguez reflected on how a routine reconnaissance mission had evolved into an operation that potentially changed the security situation throughout the region. The woman who had emerged from the mist had indeed been exactly what she claimed to be, an ally with critical intelligence who had helped prevent significant coalition casualties and civilian suffering. Zara would be debriefed extensively by intelligence specialists, and her future role in coalition operations would depend on careful assessment of her motivations, capabilities, and reliability. But her performance during the operation had demonstrated both courage and competence that suggested significant potential value for future missions. Rodriguez knew that Operation Silent Thunder would be analyzed and studied by military professionals for years to come, as an example of how small unit operations could have strategic impact when combined with accurate intelligence, tactical flexibility, and the courage to make difficult decisions under extreme pressure. The mountains of Afghanistan had claimed many victims over the centuries, but on this day, they had also provided the setting for a victory that demonstrated the effectiveness of professional soldiers working with local allies who shared their commitment to preventing violence and protecting innocent lives. The mist had lifted, but the memory of what had been accomplished in its concealment would endure long after the fog had dissipated into the clear mountain air.